Do you ever want to dive deeper into the Bible, but you just don't know where to begin or struggle to feel like you even have the time? When you read the Bible, do you get frustrated because you know there is so much more in there? You just have no clue how to get it out. Or maybe you just want to know the Bible better, and so you're looking for any resource to help. Well, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the Context and Color of the Bible podcast. We are two sisters. I'm Erica.
I'm Veronica.
We love to study the Bible, and we love to help others understand it better. We have found in our own study of Scripture that when we bring back the context, it actually adds to our understanding. It adds color to the black and white pages of the text.
You went a little off script there, didn't ya?
I got myself a little confused. I hope that last part made sense.
You did. I was waiting to see how you were going to swing back around. Because we're sharing a mic. What are you looking for?
My Bible.
It's under there. Your teeny tiny Bible?
My Bible.
We're sharing a mic because we are still in Micah. It's been a whole week. But in reality, it's been like a month since we last recorded. Mm-hmm. So we were quickly having Bryan refresh our memories of Micah 1, which Erica had in her notes, thankfully. It was a court case.
Yes.
And the evidence was being brought.
Yeah.
Should
be quizzing you guys.
I know you shouldn't. Because the listeners are going, we just heard it last week. We remember it all. But in reality, it's like, I don't.
I know. We need the listeners to help us.
Yes. So, Micah 2, and I'm handing it over to Bryan.
Yep. We pick up the court case initiated in chapter 1, continues. And just as a reminder for those maybe in the studio here, it was a court case over the breach of covenant that had happened between the two nations, the northern nation of Israel, southern nation of Judah. And in chapter 1, they're both personified as women, named by their capital cities. Mm-hmm. As a reminder, the Hebrew word ir is the Hebrew word city, and that's a feminine word.
Can you spell that word?
I-R, yeah.
Oh, I was thinking E-R, but...
Okay. It's kind of a sound that goes deeper in your throat, so you get the ear.
That's why I don't ever try to say the Hebrew words.
So anyways, feminine word, and the Hebrew mindset would personify that as naturally as a woman. So that's how oftentimes in Scripture, not just in the book of Micah, you will see them, the writers referring to cities as women. These two women are brought to trial for infidelity, their husband being the Lord, and the trial takes place. As we move into chapter 2, we move from the general, even in a typical trial there's opening statements that set the stage, and then we're going to go into specific evidences. And that's what we're going to find here in chapter 2 and chapter 3. Here's specific examples of the breaches of covenant that you've made. Yes, we talked about in chapter 1, it was really at a high level, it was idolatry that was the main problem. Well, now let's look at, here's evidence of the idolatry. Even I sat in on a trial many years ago, and there was 4 specific charges that were brought against.
Like petit jury or grand jury?
What's the first one you said?
Petit. That's where you sit on the jury.
I was on the jury.
He was the foreman.
Oh,
foreman
that
of
does
a jury.
not surprise me.
Yeah.
It's a petit jury.
Actually, not a fun trial, but...
You'll get it next year in government.
Yay. Each of the 4 charges, there were multiple elements that needed to be presented in order to get to the point where, yes, this particular charge is upheld by the jury. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I feel like Micah's doing. Here's specific elements, specific examples, and these point to the greater charge of idolatry and turning away from the Lord.
Okay.
So let's jump in. I'm sure other points will come up as we go. So chapter 1 or chapter 2, there's two groups we'll focus on. This chapter is broken up, focusing on wicked leaders, then false prophets, and then it closes with a brief section of hope.
Okay.
And I think, as we talked about last time, Micah, there's 3 movements in the book of Micah. Each one starts with the Hebrew word Shema, hear, listen. Chapter 1 starts with that. Then chapter 3 will be the next one. So chapters 1 and 2 are the first movement of Micah. And if you imagine the shape of a V, there's a doom kind of downward and then an upward hope. And so the last part of chapter 2 is that upward hope of the first movement. So we're completing the first movement here with chapter 2. And giving this specific evidence starts with, woe to those who devise wickedness or plan iniquity. They plot evil on their beds, and at morning's light they carry it out, because it's in their power to do it. So this first group, I like to call them the wicked schemers. And Micah gives them a woe oracle, which, if you guys remember, that was something we talked about back when we did Habakkuk.
Which was episode 154.
Boom.
Well, you
Wow.
totally looked it up before we started. And I screenshot.
Cheater.
But, okay, do you have your note from there?
I do. You told us to look for these 3 things in oracles: the woe statement, the threat or the punishment, and then the reason why.
Okay, so the woe statement, the threat, and then the reason why. So let's look for those and identify those, because those are prevalent, or they exist here as well. So as a reminder, if you haven't heard that episode, when you have a prophet, or in this day and age, if they're giving a woe oracle, it is as if they're delivering the obituary to this party.
Okay.
So it would, woe to those wicked schemers. And we're going to list all these problems that are coming your way and the problems that you've created. And it's supposed to shock the audience to be like, oh my goodness, I mean, woe is me, because this judgment is coming down on my head. So it's woe to the wicked schemers. And why is the woe coming? It's because they're plotting evil in their bed. The first sliver of dawn is showing up in the east, and they're out the door going to perform evil. Whatever they've been plotting all night long, now they're ready to do it. And we get because it's in their, the power is in their hands to do it. So these are people that have wealth, means, the ability to get things done. They're the business people and the movers and the shakers of the community.
Powerful people.
Yeah. And remember, in that day and age, they didn't have email they could do all night long. They didn't have social media. They weren't working on their computers and everything. What would they be able to do? I mean, they're little oil lamps, I'm sure. But for the most part, what can you do at night? You can plot, you can plan. And then as soon as the day comes, then you can execute on your plans.
Haman.
Yeah. Yeah. Good parallel example. So these, rather than resting, rather than, recuperating, being with family,
enjoy your night.
Yeah. Just plain, recharging for the next day, they're rolling around in their beds wondering, what else can I do? How else can I take advantage of the people around me? And we'll keep reading here. So they covet fields and seize them, houses, and take them away. They oppress a man and his house, a man and his inheritance. So you get this progression. They're coveting in their heart, leads to scheming in their mind, and then at morning's light, they can act on it. And the actions are seizing, which leads to suffering, which all starts from coveting in their hearts. So you start in the heart,
Right.
and it ends with suffering of other people. And that's the progression that's going on. And there's, like you said, you pointed out, that's your reason for this woe oracle. And the innocent are left suffering. They're without their homes, their inheritance. And that, like, when you think about inheritance in the land of Israel, what is one of the key stories in the Old Testament or key books of the Bible you think about with inheritance?
I was thinking Ruth.
Further back. Joshua.
Oh, Joshua.
Yep. Because remember, these inheritances, they were allocated by whom?
God.
By God, and given to each family unit through Joshua and the priests. And these were then passed on from generation to generation, but ultimately they came from God.
Right. Which I just read in the year of Jubilee. That's why they go back to the original, because you take it back to who God gave it to in the first place.
Correct.
So, because I guess in a way, an inheritance is your retirement plan.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you
Survive.
Yeah.
It was your retirement plan provided by God for you to steward and maintain. So it wasn't just a plot of land. It wasn't just real estate. It was, this is what I have been given by God to be responsible for. And it's for me to maintain, to grow, to nurture, and if managed well, it will also provide for me. But what are these wicked schemers doing?
Taking it. Defrauding people of it.
Yeah, they're using fraud, probably force, other schemes
Manipulation.
and manipulation. Yeah, backroom deals to take this land, and I'm pretty sure weren't adhering to the year of Jubilee.
Well, that's what I was just saying. They didn't care about that one, probably.
Nope, they're just trying to add to their own
Build their wealth, build their empire.
little kingdoms and empires. Yep, exactly. And so,
And these are Jews. These are the Israelites we're talking about.
yeah, this is
They're defrauding
Judah, their fellow countrymen.
Okay.
People are supposed to be stewards of this from generation to generation, but now through force and fraud, they're leaving people destitute. And I noted, you want a great example of this? Ahab and Jezebel
I was just
is
thinking
a
that one.
great example of how this happened in the north. That was Samaria. They
Like
acted.
the vineyard.
Yeah.
So that would be 1 Kings 21.
Yep.
I don't know that episode number, but we had Brian do that one.
I was going to say, there's probably a really great episode
There's a
on that.
great podcast on it.
So they're acting as if the land belongs to the powerful and
Right.
not to God. So, what was that final element of the woe oracle?
It was
Justice, God,
no,
God's response,
the reason why.
threat or punishment.
The threat.
Okay.
Yeah, the reason why is they're stealing and defrauding the people from their inheritance. So now, verse 3, therefore God says, I'm devising disaster against you. You guys sit and plot on your beds and scheme. Well, I've got a scheme for you. And as is typically the case, but specifically in Micah, there's a measure for measure response.
I don't want God to do that with me. Truthfully.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No, it's just like, I hate when God does that.
Here, I think God, he likes to use that. You see that poetic justice in numerous places. And it's that you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind kind of concept. And here, these people are scheming, and God has a plan for them. And there's a little bit, it takes a little bit to untangle this, but I'll read it. I'm planning disaster against this people from which you cannot save yourselves. You will no longer walk proudly. I want to point out the word walk there, so let's put a pin there, for it's going to be a time of calamity. In that day, people will ridicule you, and they will taunt you with this mournful song. We are utterly ruined. My people's possession is divided up. He takes it from me. He assigns our fields to traders. Therefore, you will have no one in the assembly of the Lord to divide the land by lot. So many great connections to what we've already talked about. Okay, so God's plan is, number one, they're going to be shamed. These people that are the powerful schemers, they want to, build their own kingdoms, as we talked about. Well, first thing is they're no longer going to walk proudly. Walk, the Hebrew word halach, is a key word in Micah. Mm-hmm. We're going to see that again in chapter 3, or chapter 4, I mean. We're going to see it again in chapter 6 with that super popular verse, do justly, love mercy, walk humbly. So that word walk in Micah is a key word. Pay attention to it, because
circle it. Micah
is very focused on walking uprightly. Mm-hmm. And in Hebrew, it's not just about your locomotion from one place to another. Your walk was about your total lifestyle, your conduct, the reputation you have.
Walk before me.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's being brought here. Well, their total lifestyle was going to be humbled and being shamed rather than their kingdom. And how are they going to be shamed? It's through this taunt song that's mentioned. And here's where it gets a little complicated, and this is how I am understanding it. Micah's delivering this word of judgment to the wicked schemers, and he's saying, look, you're going to be shamed. A time of calamity is coming, and this group is going to come in, and they're going to taunt you by singing this song, "We're utterly ruined. My people's possession is divided up. He takes it from me. He assigns our field to traders." How I understand that is like the playground bully who, while he's punching the poor victim on the ground, he's saying, "Call the teacher's aide, come on." He's mockingly saying the words that the one suffering. Exactly. Okay. So if you read these words, and I know there's like multiple layers, then you're trying to understand it, but I think if you read it in that way, this taunt song is in the mouth of the one coming to punish these wicked people while they're suffering. And it just adds to their shame and being mocked, and how they're going to be brought lower and lower and lower in the eyes of the world through this mocking response. And we've talked in past, I think with Habakkuk, but also in chapter 1 here in Micah, I see these prophetic books as the director's commentary on the actual history that was taking place at that time. Well, the northern kingdom is suffering defeat at the hands of the Assyrian Empire. They would be the ones that are barreling down, coming to the front door, as it were, of the nation of Judah. And they most likely are the ones pictured in the background, like bringing this judgment to these wicked people in the nation of Judah. So I think that's what's being described there. And ultimately, the final punishment in verse 5 is that there's going to be, you'll have no one to, what does it say, divide the land by lot, which goes back to Joshua, because that's where they're dividing the land. And in essence saying, if Joshua's day had happened now instead of back then, you wicked schemers would have no one in the assembly to represent you or your family, i.e., your family line will be eradicated. Right.
You tribes that are left, you wouldn't even be there.
Yes.
Because ultimately, if you go back to Joshua, they were one united kingdom.
Yep.
And now we've lost 10 tribes. So we're talking to the 2 remaining tribes. So,
and this is the threat that's coming towards them. Like, are you going to join the northern kingdom that's already suffered this disaster? Like, you can see an example right there, people. And effectively their legacy would be erased from history because, in essence, saying, so what good was all that property and stuff you amassed and you were scheming for on your beds at night? Because it's all going to be blown away like chaff. So
you also got to wonder if like Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, the curses and the blessings.
Oh, absolutely.
are like going through. I mean, because that's what I'm studying right now, but it's like, that's the whole point. You listen, you'll prosper, you'll do great. You disobey, here's all the bad things that are coming. And it'd be like, oh, God told me about this. I mean, it's one of those things like when your parent says, if you do this, here's the consequences.
Yeah.
You know, if you're texting and driving and you get in a car accident, you're going to total your car and it's going to cost you thousands of dollars and blah, blah, blah. And just go, oh, my mama told me about that.
Yeah. And in some senses, what Micah was saying was a refreshed version of that for his time, but it wasn't anything they hadn't heard before.
Right.
So to understand Micah, you need to know the Torah? Is that what we're saying?
Just a little. That's a drum we beat regularly.
Yeah. There shouldn't have been anything new on this front for Micah's audience.
Right.
Most likely they had just, I don't want to read that thing.
Right.
That's so whatever, 1,000 years ago. Like,
Right.
I don't need to.
So old news. That's Old Testament.
Older.
That's Old Testament.
Older. Yeah. So, yeah, I think the lesson here is don't try to build your own little kingdom at the expense
Of your brothers.
Yes. Yep. And what God has assigned and blessed people with, don't look to, accumulate and steal that for yourself. That's also part of that thread. So, anything else on our wicked schemers?
No, I think they're good. They can go away.
They can move on. So verse 6 then introduces the second group. Do not preach, thus they preach. One should not preach of such things. Disgrace will not overtake us. So this starts to introduce a new group, which there seem to be like false prophets, false religious teachers. And Micah, there's numerous incidents in the Old Testament where you have this battle of prophets. You have Elijah and the prophets of Baal, and you have Jeremiah and Hananiah, the false prophet that they're like going at each other. Yes. Or there's several other incidents. Even Amos and the false priest Amaziah, and he's like, "Shut up, get out of here." So
What
Micah
translation is that in?
That's the Bryan translation.
Okay.
He probably said worse things, actually. Micah runs into he's got his arch nemesis group as well, these false prophets that he does battle with. And they show up here and they show up in chapter 3 too. We get these glimpses of two very opposing perspectives. And Micah's relaying these words to us in verse 6, but what seems to be is these false prophets are telling him, don't preach, do not prophesy, their prophets say. Do not prophesy these things. Like, we don't want to hear it, essentially. Shut up. They're like, there's a whole other religious flavor that's happening during the time of Micah that was completely opposed to his message. And they were trying to justify through scriptural means and through some other evidences that we'll see in this chapter and chapter 3. Things are fine. Like, you just be quiet, sit down, shut up, go in the corner, and things are fine. So that's what we see here in verse 6. They're like, don't prophesy these things. Disgrace isn't coming for us. We're fine. And Micah responds, well, should it be said, does the Lord become impatient? Does he do such things? Well, do not my words do good to the one whose ways are upright? That's the key word. So that's what translation? That's NIV. ESV makes it a little more clear. Do not my words do good to him who walks uprightly.
Oh.
There's our key word again. Walk. So the wicked schemers are going to be walking in shame. They will not walk haughtily. And here the false prophets are saying, does not God's words do good to him who walks uprightly?
Okay, I'm confused. The false prophets are verse 6 and verse 7?
No, the false prophets are speaking verse 6.
And Micah's responding in verse 7.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're saying, don't preach, don't say these things because disgrace isn't coming our... Okay. They're interjecting. Micah's been talking to these wicked schemers, and then all of a sudden the false prophets come in from the side. Again, imagine the trials kind of going back and forth, and you've got the opposing arguments back and forth. Well, they're like, whoa, Micah, just shut up. You can't even say this because disgrace isn't coming our way. Our theology is everything's fine here. We're doing great. And then Micah's like, no, God's words do good to those who walk uprightly, who have a lifestyle of righteous living. Then God's words bring life. What you see in Proverbs, what you hear in Deuteronomy. And Micah's like, okay, let me give some examples, because lately my people have risen up as an enemy. They strip the rich robe from those who pass by with no thought of war. So they're stealing the robes of people that are passing by. Then the women of my people you drive out from their delightful homes, and the young you take their splendor away.
NIV says blessing.
NIV says, blessing. So Micah gives these specifics of here's what's going on. Here's what you false prophets, you justify. And there's a twofold progression because we start with men, women, children. You're going from the most powerful to weakest, but you're also taking the least expensive to the most expensive. You're taking a robe, then a house,
you're right,
and then like a splendor inherit, like the
you said inheritance.
The inheritance is what's behind that, I think. So you're taking increasingly valuable things from the increasingly defenseless.
Right. Those who can't defend themselves.
And these false teachers were theologically justifying it. What I see here is a wicked symbiosis happening, because even as in the timing, these guys come in and they're trying to defend against Micah's attack against the schemers, and you can see these guys are in cahoots.
Right.
The schemers are funding the policies and setting up policies that make the false prophets' theology have a platform. And the false prophets theologically keep people in check so that the schemers can keep going and keep doing what they're doing.
It's an endless cycle.
Yeah.
I'll watch out for you, you watch out for me, and we'll just defraud. We'll plunder everyone.
Yeah.
I'll use another word from government today. Plunder.
And then the poor people are the ones that get run over by this wheel. Yep. And you can imagine Micah's just like, don't tell me to be quiet. Like, you guys are wicked.
Have to get up and go away.
Yeah. Right. And verse 10, arise, go, for this is no place to rest because of the uncleanness that destroys. He's talking about this land is not going to sustain you. what did I have in my notes here? Yeah, the land cannot sustain this evil. There's another Deuteronomy reference.
Well, and even Leviticus is, we haven't done it yet, but that's part of Leviticus. If you can corrupt even the land,
it will vomit you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that is the building blocks of what Micah's hitting on here. This land cannot sustain your wickedness, and it's going to vomit. Yeah, I have it right here in my notes. Leviticus 18:28. The land will vomit you out. They've broken the covenant, and like the wicked schemers, they are going to be evicted. Both groups are going to be evicted from the land. The people of Judah saw that it happened to the north. So they're very clear warning example. Like, guys, this is coming.
Do something.
Do something. And I have actually, in the ancient mind, being exiled from the land, losing your family line, that was worse than death itself. Because everything was about your tie to the land and the legacy and the family line and the history. So
because I'm just a link in a chain. You can remove me and the chain's still there. You remove everything and the chain's gone.
Yeah. And it's like you've been erased from the pages of history. And all of your future descendants
are gone.
Would be, yeah. So that was a fate worse than death. And then Micah he gives a little final blow here. Verse 11, if a man would go about uttering wind and lies, saying, I'll preach to you wine and strong drink, he'd be the preacher for this people. Like,
I think there might be a little attitude in there.
Yeah. So the kind of party prophet is the one that these people want to listen to. We only want to listen to the good times. We only want to listen to.
They need King Potty Pants from Daniel 5. Yes.
Yep, he's a few hundred years away yet. But that's, I think Micah's final kind of frustration. You guys, all you want is, and I think here's how I summarize it. Just keep on doing what you're doing because things are great. If that's what you want.
Sarcasm.
Yeah. You can see the parental side of this coming out. I'm sure I've done that to my kids. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep on going. Looks good. So we already talked about the symbiosis, and one thing I think for all listeners to just be reminded, I think Micah takes very seriously these false prophets, not only the twisted teaching, but the fact that they're benefiting off of twisting God's words, and that they're going to be judged, as James 3 says, teachers will be judged with even greater strictness. So he has no patience. Like, he's not as sarcastic and as full of venom for the schemers as he is for these false prophets. And we'll see another version of that in chapter 3. So you're ready for the last section?
Yep.
Ready for a little hope in the midst of all this?
Sure. I kind of like the picture of Micah just walking up. Fine, take the beer and the wine and the guy who brings it. I'm done with you.
Yeah.
Don't think they need any hope right now. But I like hope. I like when we end with hope.
It is a bit jarring in the chapter because we're focused on these groups, and then all of a sudden God breaks through and is like, I will surely assemble all of you, O Jacob, and gather this remnant of Israel. And I will set them together like sheep in a fold, like a flock in a pasture, a noisy multitude of men. So there's this like stark about face. And then Micah goes into this shepherding picture in the ancient world. And he's focusing on the remnant. Depending on your theological flavor, you might hear the word remnant. Some might hear it more than others. But remnant is a key word in Micah, along with halak, walk, remnant, she'erit, is a key concept in each of the hope segments of Micah. He brings up about the remnant. And so that in and of itself reminds us, in the midst of this judgment, in the midst of a threatening, looming exile, God still will always protect a remnant that's faithful to him. Doesn't mean that remnant might still suffer greatly,
right?
But he will retain that remnant. And we'll see that.
And they will be faithful.
Yes.
He will be faithful to the faithful ones.
Yep.
Okay.
And we'll see that repeated theme in each of the hope segments. So this remnant is pictured like sheep in a pen. So you get this really cool shepherding picture where even today, if you go to the more traditional locations in the Middle East, you'll find as evening is coming, a shepherd will gather. They have different pens that they'll gather the sheep in, and once all the sheep are inside through the gate, some instances the shepherd will actually sleep in the gate, and that's where you get the picture where Jesus is talking about, I am the gate. Or in some instances, like here in Micah, they'll pile up just loosely some rocks to
make a boundary.
Be like a door closing this gate. And then that keeps the sheep all together for the night. But then imagine if you were that sheep, it's not.
You're squished in there. You're ready to get out.
Yeah. Throughout the night, you're hungry. You want to get out. You're just, this is the picture that's happening. They're hungry and cramped. There's a lot of noise. And as the sun's coming up in the morning, they're just like ready to just get out. And that's this picture where it kind of blurs between this remnant of people as a sheep or a flock of sheep in this pen, and it's like a noisy multitude of men. And before we look at the last verse, I think, again, the historical backdrop of what was taking place here, or what was about to take place, I think God was giving Micah a vision towards what would happen when Assyria entered and invaded the land. You have that key story of the people under Hezekiah were all bunched up in Jerusalem, and Sennacherib came and besieged the city. He had already destroyed many or most of the other towns of Judah, and now was here at the very end, quote unquote, knocking on the door of Jerusalem, ready to destroy it. And verse 13, God says, he who opens the breach goes up before them. They break through and pass the gate, going out by it. Their king passes on before them, the Lord at their head. And so here's a messianic term. As the rabbis around the time of Jesus, they looked at this verse. He who opens the breach is the breaker. So actually, the breaker is a messianic title. And they saw this verse as very messianic. Because back to the sheep, that first light of dawn comes up and the sheep are ready to get out, but they can't quite get through because those rocks are in the way. Well, the shepherd would go over and kind of start dislodging a couple of the stones, and the first sheep, you can bet, was like, okay, I see my way out, and they would boom. Yeah.
Let me help. Push Fred to the front of the line.
Right. So Fred goes through, and then a couple rocks dislodge, and then, Mary and Sue can go through, and more rocks are coming, and then before you know it, like, it's just this stream. You can actually find some cool videos, some drone videos on YouTube of the sheep as they come pouring out. Just really cool.
Oh, neat. Okay.
But the breaker is the one that first opens that way. And sorry, I was talking messianic terms. There's kind of this where Jesus kind of referred to John the Baptist as that one who was the breaker, and then he as king was the one that passed through.
Okay.
Micah has it's almost like the two are they one? Are they two? But that's how Jesus kind of pictured it with his disciples. And so sorry, I'm bouncing between multiple time zones. So you've got the picture of the sheep. You've got Micah's day where the city and Hezekiah were besieged, and then ultimately God breaks forth against the Assyrian army and kills 185,000 of them, and they retreat, and Jerusalem is freed.
Spared again.
And you also have the time of Jesus where they are using these layers, and Jesus is saying, well, John the Baptist is the one that initially will dislodge a stone or two, and then I'm going to be leading my flock with them. And that's the key. We see the Davidic king here is with his people.
Oh, yeah.
He's in the fold, but then also passing out with them and the Lord at their head. So he's not a king who's commanding at a distance or barking out orders. He is with his people, breaking out with them.
And people are going to ask, you're talking about Matthew 11, right? For Jesus and his reference to this?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Is that?
Yeah.
Is this where violent men are breaking out?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Matthew
exactly
11.
it.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence and violent men take hold of it. That's the Hebrew word behind that is about the breaker or the violence. And that's it's not that he's calling people to take up arms. He's talking about the violence in this jostling, moving flow of humanity kind of concept.
Okay.
That's what's behind that. So in chapter 1, one of the questions that emerged was this destiny on the Davidic king. What's going to happen when this nation has gone totally off track? And the Davidic king is potentially suffering shame because we saw these pictures of David bowed low, humbled, hiding in a cave. Those were the pictures that were brought forth of David in chapter 1. Well, here we see there is a remnant. God is going to bring a king who will be with his people and will lead them confidently as a shepherd leading his flock. And that king will be at their head. So these promises are part of that hope concept. And again, as we see in each hope section, the remnant is being brought up. The king concept will show up in each hope section as well, as we hit those.
Okay. I like ending with the hope, and you kind of go, okay, was Micah like talking to this quiet little group over here who's just
the ones getting run over
watching,
by
going, just hang on.
Yeah, right.
The Davidic king is coming. The king is coming. Just hold on. All you over there partying, have at it.
Right.
So I like this. I'm excited for next week.
Next week.
Yes. So thanks for joining us. As always, we have Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, Facebook. If you want to interact with us, our website, www.thecontextandcolorofthebible.com. If you want to jump in, if you want to interact with us, if you want to tell Bryan another minor prophet you would like him after we're done with Micah to come back and break down.
A challenge.
I know. Nobody's ever taken me up on those challenges, especially when it comes to telling you to do anything. Because have you written your Nahum commentary yet?
Nope.
Yeah. See, so
Haven't.
might get a poll going on Instagram. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.